Everybody knows that I have a friend called Garry, and I catch up with him from time to time, and he has so much good things to share. Now, Garry is one of the most successful people in Australia and one of the wealthiest families in Australia, and I just like his lessons in life. So good. So I'm going to share another video. I did one a while ago, maybe it would have been a year or two ago now, that tips from Garry. I asked him, he likes to be anonymous and private. He helps a lot of people in business and I guess mentors, I guess, in a certain way. But I just see him, I just like his friendship. I was going to take a notepad. So when I pulled up the other day and I was in the car parking in the city, and he has some buildings in the city, and we met at one of them. And I went to grab my notepad because I was just catching up and shooting the breeze with him, I guess. And he goes, and I went to pick it up, and I was like, he's going to think. I did take a notepad over the years when I caught up with him, but I thought this time we know each other quite well. I think he'd think I'm a bit weird if I took my notepad. But I should have. So I should have. There's 3 hours we sat there and chatted, and I just asked him about life lessons and things like that. And so I had to remember them. And I was thinking to myself, I should have brought the friggin' notepad, because he just has wisdom after wisdom after wisdom, and he's such a nice person. Anyway, and the reason many people have said, can you get Garry on the podcast? But a long time ago, it could have been even 10 years ago now, I said to his son, Sean, do you reckon your dad would come on a podcast? And he said, no, he just likes to be a bit private and things, probably not. So I've just never asked. You know, I put his friendship first over any of that stuff. But I did ask Garry's permission if I could share some of these tips. And I said, do you mind if I say your name? And he's like, Matt, yeah, that's okay. But I could tell like he was probably just saying okay because I was asking. But he goes, he said, it's one thing to be wealthy. It's a nut, but it's even better. No, it's good to be wealthy. Something along these lines. It's good to be wealthy, but he said it's even better being wealthy and private. Oh, no, wealthy and anonymous. And I was like, yeah, there's something in that, isn't there? So, you know, when I suppose when you have extreme wealth, your privacy gets diminished as well. But with him, you know, I was walking through the city with him. We walked around and talked, and he said, I've got to get my 10,000 steps in. So he actually walked me back to my car. It was blocks away. But we walked past some of his properties and things, and he was just telling me stories about, you know, acquiring them and things like this. This is some of Sydney's best real estate. And in one building, it's a huge building, and in one of them, we're in the foyer. I said to Garry, do people know you own this building? And he owns one huge one. Well, there's a number, I guess, but the ones we went to, one huge one, rebuilt it. It was, I don't know how much it's worth, a lot. There's like 50 stories in the middle of the city. But we met in one of his other ones just down the road, and it's right in the middle of the hub of the CBD. Both of them were. And when I was sitting in the first one with him where we met and sat in the cafe for a few hours, I was like, isn't it cool? Like all these people were around and things. And I was like, isn't it cool? Like they don't even know Garry owns this. And when we walked up to the other one at the end of the first catch up, and he was telling me the story about rebuilding it and where it is, and it's right near Parliament House, amazing property. He said, as we were walking through the big door, there's those revolving door things. I said, Garry, do the people in here know you own this building? He says, no. He goes, no, I don't think so. He said, I don't want them to. I just wander around. And I thought it was pretty cool. And then so we walked down, and one of my favourite buildings in town is where the Country Road store is on Pitt Street, and it's this amazing sandstone building. And we were walking down on the way back to get his 10,000 steps in. And I was looking at it, and I think I said, I love that building. He goes, yeah, I own that building. And I was like, what the hell? You own all of them. It's been like Monopoly for you, isn't it? He's like, you just would not know. The best. He's the best guy ever. I just love spending time with him. So in this catch up, we said, so why I was telling you that, he likes to remain anonymous. So I'm not going to say his last name. We'll just call him Garry. Everyone knows the catch up with Garry. Even though he said yes, I won't do it because I respect his privacy and who he is very much. So sliding door moments are something. He was telling me the story about his dad. I said, Garry, how did all this start? Like, where did all this come from and things? And I sort of knew, but I never really dug deep into the story because it just captivates me. Like, how do you this all begin? And he was telling me about his dad, and his dad was 13 years old, left school or got pulled out of school at 13, German migrant, extremely poor. He used to write letters to companies basically asking for any sort of job opportunity. And he said, hi, I'm Norman Vincent, and his last name, and then I'm very poor. I want to be rich or something, and could I have a job? Something along these lines. Anyway, that's how it started. And then one thing led to another. And I reckon for an hour we talked about his dad's journey, and the most incredible thing, the sliding door moments. After a while, I said to Garry, it's amazing when you look back at all these things that happened to him. And the story is incredible, amazing. And I said, isn't it, if all those sliding door moments didn't happen, you guys would not have been where you are now. And it really made me think about, in life, you just can't tell why things are happening. You might think they're the worst thing in the world, but it directs you over to here and then to here. And it was just the story is like, wow. And one thing led to another, like literally his dad got put off from a company because the CEO in one of them, when he was a salesman, all his dad wanted to be was a salesman in life. And back then I can't remember if he said the 30s or the 40s, but back then that was like quite an esteemed job. And a CEO of a huge company that he worked for actually put him off and made him go work somewhere else because he felt that there was more opportunity for him elsewhere. And like, you'd be devastated because you were like working so hard. And I was thinking about his dad when he was a young guy, had to pay his bills and do this and trying to work, and you get put off because that CEO believed in him so much. He said, forced him to go and do something else. Like, you'd be like, oh no, I want to be here. And it's almost like his dad just took opportunities and then, went where the impulse went and did this and gave it a go. And I don't know, it's just incredible. Sliding door moments is the first thing I took out of the meeting. The 3-hour meeting with Garry, I was like, you just can't tell in life. You might think it's the worst thing, but it's just the thing that you need. And then one thing led to another. Wealth comes with time. Garry said that wealth comes with time. Don't look for the quick wins. He talks about 100-year assets, buying the best asset you can. Like in 100 years, they'll still be a good asset, like a great blue chip property. Or he also talked about shares, but they just very low risk, best you can buy, hold it for a long time. Don't go for the quick profit. He said you actually do yourself out of the wealth creation in the long term if you sell and buy and sell and buy, just trying to get that quick win. There was a lot more to that. I sort of can't remember it all, but wealth comes in time. And then he said, with any property, you hold it for a period yourself and you're the custodian of it. You don't actually ever really own it. Then you hand it over to somebody else. They're very, they still bank with the same bank their entire life. Their relationships are the reason that they have become successful. Very successful family. The relationships that they've forged. And there was a lot, we were talking a lot about that. So they still have the relationships decades and decades long, provided they do the right thing by them, provided the people do the right thing by this family and Garry. They're big on that. Do the right thing, they'll stick with you. Really, really good. Don't sell when everybody else does. That's so true. Just because everyone's like, oh, the market's no good or this, and they're selling, he said, do not sell. Never break a handshake. Never break a handshake. There was a lot in these. In the whole few hours, that sort of popped up a lot. And there was a story, I'm going to keep it as short as I can, but there was a story, they were building a building and the people next door, they had a deal with the people next door. And right at the last minute, it took quite a long time to negotiate with next door. It was about air rights. And right at the last minute, the people next door wanted more money from Garry and the family. And Garry just said no. No, we had a deal. And there was a lot involved in this. And there was, everyone was in a bit of a flap who was associated with it. And Garry's just said, I've shaken hands, so I'm not changing and I won't be made to change because we've shaken hands. So the handshake overrides everything. And he was prepared to lose the deal, lose the extra part of the deal because they weren't honouring their part of the deal. So once he shakes your hand, that's it. Piece of paper means nothing. Handshake means everything. So in life, turn up, his dad's tip to him in any job at all, doesn't matter if you're sweeping the floors or you're running a company, turn up earlier than you're expected. Do your absolute premium every day, like work to your optimum all day, every day, and stay later than you're expected every day. That is his dad's formula for success. That was the advice that he gave Garry all those years ago. And still today, when I was waiting for Garry, I was a little early because I'm always early where I go. And Garry rings me. I rang Garry a few minutes out just to make sure I was in the right lobby because there was a number of them. And he said, oh, you're early. I said, I'm always early, Garry. And Garry said, so am I. So, I think Gary's just in his 70s now and he still has the same principles, doesn't matter who he's meeting. I asked Garry about debt because there's so much different information out there. And if I want to, Garry is one of the wealthiest people in Australia, and if someone's there, I listen to what they say. I'm all ears. And there's lots of confusing info out there about debt, and you use debt to get wealthy and all this sort of stuff. And I remember many meetings ago, Garry said to me, buy one property, pay it off. And when you've paid that one off, then buy another one and then pay it off. And I've always been a little confused around the debt part because I'm very debt adverse. And I said to Garry, is debt good? And he said, no. And I was like, okay. He said, debt isn't great because you can't go broke if you don't owe anyone anything. Pretty true. Very true. His whole journey has been about slow and steady, slow and steady. Slow and steady, slow and steady. Very considered. Sure, they extend themselves to do things, but not at the risk of themselves. We were talking about money in general and wealth, and he said, Matt, you only need so much. He said, you only need so much to be comfortable. Being comfortable, you're halfway in front. He said, just be comfortable. You don't need too much. So obviously if you have more, then do some more, but don't do it at the cost of being comfortable and your stress levels. Then we talked about companies and leadership and all of this sort of stuff. And he said, basically bad leaders make bad companies. That's why. We talked about big companies that have literally gone broke, and we've talked about small companies that have done extraordinarily well. And he said, bad leaders make bad companies. That's it. It's true. Culture. He's huge on culture. He's huge on energy and culture and doing the right thing and feeling good and leading by example. You know, he walks his talk. He could be doing anything. He walks his talk. Very, you know, unassuming guy, extremely knowledgeable, very humble. When we went to the first cafe area in one of his buildings, he was so nice to the guy that was serving. The guy that was serving, his name's Isaac. You know, Gary's like, "Hi, Isaac, how are you today? How's your day going?" And you can tell the level of respect that they have for Garry. Like, he makes everyone feel warm and feel acknowledged, and there's just a lot in that. Quick story, when Garry came up to visit me maybe a year and a half ago or something at our office, he just wanted to pop in and say hello. He was on his way through, I think, to Newcastle area. And then when he left, he forgot to thank the receptionist for giving him a bottle of water. He walked out with me to say goodbye, and then he goes, "Oh, sorry, Matt, sorry, can I just go back in?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What do you need?" He said, "I've just forgotten to," it was Kim on the front desk, "I've just forgotten to thank Kim for the bottle of water. Please just wait 1 minute. I'm just going to go in and say thank you, and I'll come back out." I was like, it's amazing, like amazing. He's just so conscious of everybody. Bad leaders make bad companies. So Garry talked about his dad quite a bit because that was a lot of the journey we were talking about, but the level of respect he had for his dad was huge. And I really like that. You know, it's like that level of listen to people that, you know, have been there before, and, you know, his dad gave him advice, so he'd listen to this, and he's really tuned into what his dad was saying. I don't know. I just think sometimes, you know, being a know-it-all just doesn't really get you very far. You know, Garry's interested in me. He's interested in Jackson. He's interested in, you know, what the advice his dad gives him, being a sponge and absorbing, because you might just learn one little thing from these people that, you know, like a dad or someone like that. Just one little thing is the next thing that you need for the next part of the journey. He just seems to respect everybody. I really like that. He said, when you do something, always leave it better than when you left it. And I know that's probably a saying that most people know, but when he is doing something or he has a building or he has something, he said, "Matt, when I have something or where I'm doing something, I do it to the best of my capabilities and I leave it better than it was when I first had it." So I'm just mindful. I suppose it's just a little tip. And that we were talking about one of his buildings, and he said, you know, we didn't have to fix it up and renovate it a bit and all this, but we wanted to leave it better than when we first took it on. You know, Garry said to me, they're very frugal. They don't, you know, they live just in a certain way. That's how they like to live. And they're just frugal. Their whole company was frugal, and not at what I took away. He said his head office was just very simple. So when people walked in there, it wasn't big and flashy. He said we had one nice room sometimes we do meetings in, but the rest was just all very simple. He said, that's how I live my life, just in a frugal way that's, you know, bit under the radar, not flashy, blah, blah, blah. And you know what I took out of the word frugal? When people think about it, because it's like frugal means not spending too much. But I think really in their world, they appreciate what they have. They don't need to blast it everywhere, so they get recognition that they're amazingly above everybody else. I think in their world, when people walked into their head office and it was just, he said, we had one typewriter, very basic furniture, lino on the floor. I think they want to relate to everybody. And that's the thing I took out of the word frugal in that way. And, you know, you don't need a lot of crazy, like you don't need to announce you're successful. It has an energy about it. When Garry rings, I answer. When he needs something, I do it for him. When I go to Sydney and sit there for 3 hours, I don't look at my phone. Respect, admiration, inspiration, all of that comes. His watch was, I looked at his watch, it was just a basic watch. He just doesn't have any labels on him, like as in any brands or nothing like that. And funny enough, a lot of the brands that we all know, all these, huge brands in the world, they rent properties off this man. But he doesn't wear any of that stuff. I was like looking at his watch going, that's just like a normal watch, like I don't know. I didn't even know what it was, like $100 watch or something. It's incredible. And I think what they do is they appreciate what they have. When they talk about frugal, they want to relate just to everybody because that's who they are internally, and they don't need to announce that, hey, we're successful. They only buy blue chip things. I mentioned it before, but we're talking about shares. They only buy blue chip things that return dividends. They don't punt things. They don't go to the latest, this could be the next big craze. They're just blue chip, steady, long-term investors, and it's proved that formula has proved very successful. Just do what they do. There's just a couple more tips here. Being a good person is how you win the long game. Manners breeds respect. Manners is memorable. People will remember how you treated them, and I think out of all the things I've learned off Garry is treat everybody as though they're very important. He just seems to. He was telling me about another guy who he catches up with who rang him one day, and I said, Garry, how come you help all these people? And he said, I just want to see them do well. And I'm sure, he can only spend time where he spends time, but just got a very good heart. He genuinely wants to see people do well. He said to me, Matt, you've done so well in life. And I'm sitting there going, Garry, I've done nothing like you've done. In my head, I'm like, sort of. He goes, I just really respect what you've done in your life to do what you've done. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'd rather talk about you, Garry. I think, and I'm feeling like this big compared to what he's done. But that's just how he is. That's how he sees the world. The best in everyone and how to get the best out of yourself because it's in your control. I think the thing from what I feel from Garry is the choice is yours, how you're going to spend today. Are you going to get there early? Are you going to be awesome at what you do? Are you going to stay a little later? Are you going to give it 110%? Are you going to make the person that gives you coffee feel better for the day and smile and say thank you and leave them a tip maybe? I don't really know. Are you going to remember somebody's name? Are you going to share energy with people? Are you going to help somebody just get a little bit better today because they need a little bit of your advice or attention? I don't know. That's the thing I took out of all of this. All of the stuff that they've accumulated over the years, I just think it's an extension of their beliefs, like themselves, their character. The other thing he said is go slow. Just go slow. You don't need to be the most successful tomorrow, but go slow and just do the right things along the way, and it will end up somewhere great. He says have money in the bank. I said, well, do you keep a lot of money in the bank? Do you not? And he said, we keep, he said, always keep money in the bank. There, so you secure. I've heard so much advice around this stuff, and I know a lot of people, and some people say keep nothing in the bank so you're always hungry. And I've always thought that was a bit weird because, I like when there's some there, so in case you need it. But his advice, I would listen to him. Have money in the bank. Make that your number one priority, to have a certain amount in the bank that helps you feel secure. Do not overextend yourself. He said, don't overextend. If you don't have the money, don't get it. Simple. Just don't do it. He only buys the money. He only buys things along the way, especially when he was younger, if he had the money. I think that's a good principle. I mean, now he could buy anything he wants, but over the years, he never had debt. He wasn't interested in debt. They bought as they had it. I understand there's a home loan, things like that. Maybe you just need a home loan and just pay it off and focus on that. But keep life very simple. As he said, you only need so much to be comfortable, and being comfortable, I think, brings peace of mind. Okay, there's just 3 more things I'm going to leave you with today. Garry said, you don't need half the things that you want. So before you buy them, just think you don't really need most of the stuff. Once he was doing a deal and an agent said to him, and he's had relationships with agents all around everywhere, and they know when Garry says he'll buy something, he'll buy it. So he was buying a property and an agent rang him and said, we've got another buyer. You got to make a decision. And he said, give it to the other buyer and I will be the first to congratulate them. Because if they want to move now, just give it to them and I will be the first to congratulate them. This is an amazing building. Most people will be like, oh, I need to buy this. And he said, and the agent rang and said, oh, they've bought the building. And so Garry said, I'm going to congratulate them, good on them, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the deal fell over down the line somewhere and the agent came back to Garry and he ended up buying it at less than what they offered it to him in the beginning. Not because Garry was asking for that, it's just that's how the deal actually happened to come out of it. I'll tell you what I learned from that. Emotional control. I said, Garry, you seem like you got because there was many of those stories. I said, you seem like you got an amazing emotional control. And it's, it's funny. When things happen, you've just got to accept them and keep moving forward and stay steady because you can't see how it's going to work out down there. And at that point in time, it just might not be for you. That's a big thing I took out of the meeting 2 days ago. And emotional control is extremely hard. But maybe there's a bigger plan going on here that you can see right now. And your job is to keep marching forward in the most positive way. Because if you get all twisted and tied up about it, you're going to put yourself out of the path of what's waiting for you because you'll be over here somewhere vibrationally. So emotional control is your part of the bargain. Moving forward is your part of the bargain. How it pans out, you can't really see right now. So if Garry got twisted and all bent up about the opportunity when the other person was going to racing and this and that and just didn't believe that it'll come at the right time if it's meant to, then he wouldn't have got the deal that he did. And the deal that he got was probably, as he says, 1 in 100-year deal. So you just never know. Last thing, there was a tenant that wanted to go into one of his buildings and he actually felt that that tenant would not succeed in his building because maybe it just wasn't the right shop for him. And this is in prominent sort of Martin Place area, so right in the middle of the city. And Garry refused the lease. Garry said, look, I just don't think it's in your interest. I don't think your business will be successful as you'd like it to be in that spot. And he refused the lease, not because the tenant was bad. The tenant was fine. It was because Garry felt it wasn't the right thing to do by them. And as I've said as I've said a lot when I've talked about Garry over the years, he never does anything unless it feels right. So whether it's in his interest or somebody else's interest to say no, and that's what he's feeling, he does that. And so he didn't put them in his building, even though he probably wanted the tenant in there and the income and all that sort of stuff, like any landlord. He genuinely felt that it wasn't the right thing by them. And that's what happened. Out of all this, I made a mistake. I didn't take the notepad. And I didn't listen to my instincts. So on that note, if you have a prompt about something and it's like, do this, do it. Because I made a mistake not taking the notepad. I probably missed about 50 different points because I was so listening so much, but I should have been writing instead of just listening. And I shouldn't have put the notepad back down in my car. It was in my hand and I went, and put it back down because I thought Garry would judge me for that because I was like, notepad in hand. But I shouldn't have. I should have taken it. Next time I will for sure.